Hi, and welcome to Border Crossings. I'm Owen Byrd, and this is a show produced to focus on the intersection of regional issues here in the Mid-Peninsula region. Today we're very fortunate to have as our guests the chiefs of 4 different local police departments, and together we'll focus on issues of public safety and law enforcement here in our region. I'm delighted to be joined by Chief Scott Vermeer from Menlo Park, Chief Wes Bowling from East Palo Alto, Chief Steve Cader from Atherton, our first guest from Atherton on this show, and we are delighted to expand the definition of our region with your participation, and Chief Pat Dwyer from Palo Alto. We'll begin by giving each of you an opportunity to give a brief report on the current issues facing your departments and issues of public safety in your communities. Scott, why don't you begin?
Hello, and as you may know, Menlo Park is a community that enjoys a high quality of life. We have a relatively low crime problem. The issues that face Menlo Park now that the citizens really seem to be concerned about when I go to neighborhood meetings are probably consistent with much of what other chiefs hear. Traffic is in the neighborhoods continues to be a top priority of the citizens. In Menlo Park, we're also focusing in on our code enforcement issues and enforcement to better the quality of life and the general look of the community. As a new chief, I'm just been on the job here in Menlo Park for 3 months. We're really working to do some expansion of our community policing efforts, and that's pretty much what we're doing right now in Menlo Park.
Thanks. Chief Bowling, how about East Palo Alto?
Well, East Palo Alto is currently enjoying our newfound fortune by having the Gateway Ravenswood Shopping Center open. And the primary issue for us of late has been, this is something new to the city, having such a shopping center, and policing such is a little bit different than what we're accustomed to. So right now we're doing a lot of refining of our work with the loss prevention officers of the retail shopping center and the issues that brings, which heretofore we had not had to work on. In addition to that, I'm very excited about a new gang prevention program that we're working on with the schools of East Palo Alto. Our family violence prevention program, we're expanding that to include gang prevention. And so my folks just got back from a conference in Las Vegas where they attended the National Gang Symposium, and they are putting together the curriculum for gang awareness, gang abatement, and gang prevention in the schools. In addition to that, we are in the process of revising our community-oriented policing program. I should say not a program, but our philosophy and how we deal with it. The city recently, with the assistance of the Enterprise Foundation, decided to go back to square one. We are looking at revising our vision statement, our mission statement, and our goals and objectives to bring them forward to what the city is looking at now. Previously, we were operating under our 1992 assumption that crime was rampant and we had all kinds of violence all over the city, and that was what our community policing was originally based on. So we're now looking at it as something more, and as more of a tool to be able to develop our quality of life issues for the community, which include issues such as code enforcement. As Scott said, traffic abatement now is more the issue and concern as opposed to the gun violence that we previously had to deal with. Also, I personally just came back from a Weed and Seed conference in Houston, where we're looking at applying for a Weed and Seed grant for the city. East Palo Alto has been named one of the Brownsfield communities under President Gore's Brownsfield Showcase Initiative. And so we're looking at getting one of those grants to, again, work on seeding the community with a lot of things that will help to, again, improve the quality of life for our citizens. And that's pretty much where we are.
Thanks for that report. Now, the residents of this region who don't live in Atherton think of that as a pretty quiet place. What are the public safety issues in your community?
Well, we are a relatively small community. We only have 5 square miles. However, without a doubt, the #1 priority from the citizens, from the council, It's traffic. The El Camino Real, we have 35,000 cars a day driving down there. On Middlefield Road, we have 25,000 cars a day. On the Alameda, we have 12,500. A lot of cars to go through a little community. We have a 3 motorcycle unit, traffic unit, which is quite large for a small city, but we stay pretty active. We have over 1,000 traffic contacts a month. We're always looking for a variety of means of trying to get the message across through education, engineering of streets, and education through the schools. We also are very interactive with the community. We always have been. I think that's a tradition in Atherton. We offer some services that larger departments just simply don't have the time and manpower to do. For instance, we monitor over 1,200 alarms directly into our dispatch center from residents that we don't charge for. We also only have 8,000 people in a year-round population, but we have 11 schools, both public and private, which bring in about 6,500 students and teachers every school day. That offers a challenge. We're very active in the schools. We have a variety of programs, the DARE programs, Adopt-A-Cop programs. We have school resource officers. So we try to provide a wide variety of services to the community in general.
Chief Cader, thanks. Chief Dwyer, Palo Alto.
I think that I've gone through kind of an education over the last year. When I came in, and I would say over the first several months when I was in Palo Alto, I identified 3 priorities for myself, and I think those are still valid, but community-oriented policing, technology, and organizational development rapidly became the priorities when I first got there. Since I've been there over the last year, I think I've had the opportunity to listen to more of the citizen groups and get more contact and more direction from the council. Clearly, I would say the top priority, as with Steve and some of the other chiefs, is traffic. Traffic is a huge issue in Palo Alto. Palo Alto is a destination city, and it's also a city that a lot of people travel through en routes to on the commute routes on 280 and off 101 down University Avenue. The traffic and the speed on residential arterials, I would say, is the #1 priority, as you know, due to your contact with Palo Alto. In addition to that, the design and construction of the new public safety building will be a major priority for the police department over the next, I would say, 3 to 4, possibly 5 years. Recruitment and retention of officers is a large issue. Recruiting qualified people and then keeping them rather than losing them to larger agencies is a problem that we all share, I think. And certainly quality of life issues, noise, neighborhood issues, the dog leash issue, which you've probably read about in the paper. Recently, panhandling on medians has risen as one of the issues in the city that's getting a lot of attention, that type of thing.
Well, it's interesting that all of you mentioned traffic, and it's no secret to residents of this region that traffic is a perpetual concern. I heard references to enforcement, to education, to design issues that attempt to calm traffic. Can we ever get a handle on this one in this region? What are the approaches that your departments are implementing to try and make traffic move more safely in our communities? Anyone want to take a first shot at some of the specifics on traffic?
Unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to get away from enforcement. We can artificially bring down the speed in any area with heavy enforcement. You pull out, within a couple of weeks, you're going to have your traffic right back up. There are certain educational measures you can use. The electronic signs are somewhat effective, and in the schools, but it's difficult. We have so many cars coming through. It's just very difficult to try to keep them all slowed down, especially with the pace of life in the Silicon Valley, and it just seems to speed up all the time.
I'd have to echo that. East Palo Alto, as you know, University Avenue is a direct route from the Dumbarton Bridge into Silicon Valley, and as a result of that, we just constantly have problems on University Avenue as a result of the heavy flow of traffic. And as more and more people move out of the county of Santa Clara or San Mateo to get to more affordable housing, they're going to be commuting in, which is only going to create an additional load on the streets. And so I would anticipate that traffic issue is going to be one that will be there for a long time.
Chief Vermeer, what about the specific issue of red light running, stoplight running? That one really resonates with parents and with neighborhood residents. Is there any way to more effectively enforce those laws?
Well, it's just a matter of getting the specific areas that are of specific concern to the community and doing some heavy enforcement there. Because in Menlo Park, we not only deal, like everyone else, with the speed issues and the violation issues, but just volume of traffic is a concern for the police department as well as our entire city government. And that's why, say, in Menlo Park, you hear us talking about things like smart growth, public transportation. I know Pat and his executive team in Palo Alto are dealing with those issues too. So some of the issues are speed and violations, but a lot of it is volume too. And so the police department has to be just part of the team of a citywide look at the whole issue.
And Chief Dwyer, of course, when those cars aren't moving, they're parked. And sometimes they're parked in residential neighborhoods even if they don't live there. Hasn't your department been working with some of the neighborhoods that border our downtown on this subject?
We're examining the issue of residential permit parking, and it's being studied as we speak. It's a comprehensive program, and one of the things that Palo Alto is known for is getting a lot of citizen input, so that any initiative in an area like this is going to require a lot of meetings out in the community and a lot of dialogue with the community before any proposals come forth.
It's true that people sometimes say in Palo Alto process is product, but do you want to hazard a guess about where your department might come out on this? Do you have any instincts on whether it might work or not?
I have some ideas on it, and I also have some experience from the jurisdiction that I was with prior to joining Palo Alto in this area. But until we get a lot more input from the community and really find out what the community's wishes and priorities are, and kind of balance those against planning issues and business issues, I'm not really prepared to say exactly where I think we're going to end up. I think that we're going to have to balance the interests, balance a lot of interests in developing good public policy in this area. Certainly the people in the neighborhoods have valid concerns about the quality of life in their neighborhoods. People in businesses and people who are involved in city planning and traffic flow also have legitimate issues that have to be considered. So it'll be a balanced approach.
Well, speaking of public participation, that is also part of border crossings. And what I'd like to do now is go to one of the questions that has been videotaped out on the street for you to take a crack at. I think we've got our first one available.
Police do a fantastic job. I think it would be nice if they spent a little less time policing the highways and the freeways and a little bit more time policing the residential neighborhoods, people that make U-turns in the middle of the road for parking spots and nearly run people over and take 2 parking spots and aren't very careful with people crossing the street with babies and people walking and things like that. There's a lot of people that don't stop at stop signs and they just sort of let that go and people are trying to cross the street.
They should
The policemen?
put more policemen over here. People don't stop there. There's more accidents here all the time. They won't stop. It says stop, but they won't stop. They're in a hurry. I don't know where they're going to. After they hit someone, then they stop for a long time.
Well, the 4 of you weren't kidding. Traffic is clearly on the minds of local residents.
This validates our truthfulness.
Well, there you go. The first commentator had the perception that enforcement dollars were being centered on expressways and arterials at the expense of neighborhoods. Is that a fair concern?
I think, it's the observation of most all of us travel to and from on expressways and highways, and we see police there. Obviously, all the neighborhoods can't have the limited number of officers we have in them, and so people, like any of us, notice the things that happen in front of our front doors and where our kids walk. So certainly we get a lot of complaints on the major thoroughfares in town. We enforce them. We can't be on everyone's neighborhood area all the time, and so it's a perception issue. We really try to respond out in the neighborhoods as much as possible, but we also try to get the best essentially bang for our buck in the sense of being where as many cars and volume is and where enforcement problems are with high speed.
Chief Bowling, how do you spread your resources?
I pretty much have to agree with what Scott said. We look at our commute traffic times as the times when the officers need to spend more time on, let's say, University Avenue or Pulgas Avenue in East Palo Alto, because those are the times when the most accidents are going to occur. You want that visibility during that time frame on those routes where it will cause people to slow down. And then we encourage the officers to work their off times, their off-peak hours in the neighborhoods to do a little traffic enforcement, radar enforcement in the neighborhoods where the ice cream trucks and all of those present another set of problems for us.
But aren't you squeezed on both ends during the peak periods? Because as you rightly point out, that's where the greatest volume is on your major arterials, but also people are leaving home or coming home at the end of the day during those same periods, and so there's more trips in the neighborhood. How do you balance those demands?
It's tough, especially with the small department that I have and the given number of officers that I have on a shift. But we do the very best that we can in each of those areas, and the officers use their discretion as to what's going to be best for them in many respects in terms of providing the services that are needed. And then there are a number of times when they can't be in either place because of, let's say we have a car that decides to take a side trip off of the main artery to try and get around the traffic and gets in an accident, and the officers have to pull off to take the accident report, and so you lose that enforcement on both ends.
Chief Bowling mentions the inability to cover a wide area with a limited number of personnel, and it sort of brings up the issue that was so current a couple of years ago with the red team and the general issue of how your departments interact with each other, and do you help each other, and if so, how? Can you give the viewers a little bit of an indication about how the departments interact? Chief Dwyer?
We don't have any formal task forces that involve all our agencies working together right now, but we have excellent, I would say exemplary, informal working relationships. Our detectives work together on a daily basis in identifying crime trends and working together to solve criminal violations that really cross jurisdictional lines. And whenever we have a special event or some type of an anticipated need, we know we can call each other and say, can you help me out? As recently happened with Wes calling my department, and we, in just about 2 days, put together a task force to handle a problem that was occurring just in between the two cities, and it worked very effectively. So I would say ongoing excellent operational cooperation is currently what we're doing. And we've recently talked about the need to adjust that as situations dictate.
Chief Cader, any ideas about other opportunities for cooperation among the departments?
There's always opportunities if you seek them out. In San Mateo County especially, we have certain task forces. We have drunk driving campaigns. So we're always looking for ways that we can work cooperatively. Menlo Park and Atherton are almost sister cities. We interact so well together. We'll cover each other's cities when we have department-wide meetings. We're alternate answering points for 911 for emergencies. So we do work very, very interactively together.
Now, if I'm in Menlo Park and I'm speeding and I'm being pursued by an officer and I cross over the jurisdictional line into East Palo Alto, what happens? Does your officer keep pursuing me?
Yes, the Menlo Park officer would pursue you, but it would be, I think it happens on a daily basis, that it'd be very likely that the person who might cover the call would be an East Palo Alto officer, and vice versa. If an East Palo Alto officer followed somebody into Menlo Park would cover, and it happens, I think our 4 agencies interact in sort of that way, probably on a daily basis.
And if it's not just a traffic infraction, but the pursuit was for something more serious and an arrest is made, even though the suspect was originally identified in one jurisdiction and pursued to another, where's the booking performed, and do both departments cooperate in the arrest? How does that work?
Well,
Defer to the senior chief.
There you go. The chief with the longest experience.
Most gray hair.
if it occurred in let's say the interesting question would probably be between Pat's city and mine. If we arrested someone, let's say we're pursuing someone from East Palo Alto into Santa Clara County, into Pat's city of Palo Alto. Wherever we initiated that that situation is where that person would be taken back to for booking.
I see.
So if it was initiated in East Palo Alto and we wound up in Palo Alto, we would then take the person back to Redwood City for booking.
Okay. I think we've got another opportunity to go to another question or two from members of the community. It should be available here on our monitor, or at least while it's being put up. Let me ask this. Well, oh, here we go. Ready to roll.
Washed their pots and pans down there, and it all flows down here, and you got a low section over there where Alzheimer patients come from that hospital over there, and they have to walk out in the street to keep from walking in the water.
Uh-oh.
And you know when they'll do something about it?
When?
When some of them gets hit. And then they'll come out here with the yellow ribbon and the cameras taking pictures. They don't have to do that. It's there. Can't they see it?
So let me see if I can extract from that question a little bit broader issue, which I think most of you touched on when you gave your introductions, and that's the subject of community-oriented policing. It sounded like that resident was talking about issues that are intended to be addressed locally, and of course over the past few years the notion of community policing has become almost a buzzword. How are you implementing it in your communities, and how has it evolved since the idea first burst onto the national scene? Chief Dwyer, do you want to take a crack at that?
I brought an entirely different philosophy of my own to Palo Alto PD in terms of community-oriented policing. And very specifically, Palo Alto Police Department had a division called Community-Oriented Policing that was responsible for coordinating activities and developing programs in the neighborhood. And frankly, that is not my philosophy. I think community-oriented policing is the responsibility of every officer on the department. So we changed the focus of that unit and reassigned some people. The unit is now Police Community Services and has a broader range of responsibilities. And what I have done is try to shift the responsibility for creating community partnerships and solving problems at the neighborhood level to the sergeants and lieutenants. And we've very recently adopted a program that we call our PASS program. It's a Patrol Accountability System, modeled a little bit after very successful programs in LAPD. Some good things come from LAPD, called the Fast Track program down there, that holds sergeants and lieutenants responsible for formulating plans and strategies, developing community partnerships, and implementing those strategies over a given amount of time. And very pleased with the direction that that's going.
Given the physical layout of Atherton, where it's probably not very easy to implement foot and bike patrols, which is the way we see community policing.
We do have a bike patrol.
Do you have bike patrol?
Just
Well, there
started
you
a bike
go.
patrol.
Tell us how it works in Atherton.
Just through the neighborhood. Since we don't have any commercial areas, it's very difficult to get out, and because of our large estates that we have, we really can't institute a community policing plan like some of the larger cities. I mean, essentially what it is getting back to the turn of the century with your beat cop, you know, walking the beat and knowing everybody in the community. But we try to get involved wherever we can. Our bicyclist certainly goes down and talks with kids and people walking and jogging. What we did find, some of the hardcore joggers and bicyclists don't want to be stopped to be doing any chatting, but it's been very effective, especially in schools too. We go through the high school and around the high school. And so we look for ways we can interact with the community. And then we do some of the real traditional things of neighborhood watch and have community meetings. And the last thing we do is our school resource officer. He doesn't really get involved with crimes per se. He's more of a resource to the students. He's their community policeman. That's their community. So he reports there. He works there with the students, with the faculty, and he really answers to the students first, and the faculty, and then to the department.
Is community policing working in East Palo Alto?
I think community policing is working in East Palo Alto, not as I would want it to work. We're faced with a very high volume of calls for service, which somewhat drives our police department. We have in excess of 50,000 calls for service a year. And for a department as small as East Palo Alto's, that's an excessive number. But we do have those calls for service that we have to, first of all, respond to. And then beyond that, we do a number of things that I think are very good for the community. Like Chief Dwyer, when I came, they had one officer that was assigned as the community policing officer. And I believe that that is a department-wide philosophy that should be utilized, and that all officers are responsible for community policing. So we have developed that approach to it. We still have a group of, I say a group, we have 3 officers that are assigned as what we call problem solvers. And it's their job to do what the beat cop cannot do. The beat cop reports that he has a problem at a liquor store in East Palo Alto, and he doesn't have time to work it because of the calls for service. So he refers that to the problem-solving unit. Problem-solving unit then takes that on as a project, and then they bring the pressures to bear, whether it's bringing in the health department, ABC, anyone that can have an impact on that business or that residence, for even to make sure that the problem is resolved and not just something that we constantly respond to. So between that, our school programs, our family violence prevention program, we do a number of things that are not what traditional police departments did in terms of providing community policing and trying to better the quality of life for the community.
Chief Vermeer, foot patrols in Menlo Park to get the department interacting with the community? Is that part of your program, or how do you implement it there?
Well, similar to what Chief Dwyer said, I also came into a department where community policing was in a unit, and I share Chief Dwyer's philosophy on community policing. And thus, foot patrols would be something that you see, but that's just a manifestation of a philosophy, of a way to sort of improve the contacts, the accessibility of officers. Right now, as I said, I've only been there 3 months, but we are starting to work together with the line level officers, who are really the ones who deliver the service, so they know best how this community should be policed, about expanding those the philosophy to everyone in the department, how each unit can really embrace that philosophy of community policing and give better service to our community. So that's some of the things that we're working on. We have a great core group that does some tremendous things. What I'm looking at is expanding that to discovering new communities within our community that still need to be served, and putting that accountability on each and every member of my department to do it.
Well, I know that one of the goals of community policing is to increase the public's trust in the department, in the officers, and the credibility of the police. How do you handle a tough issue that can arise and threaten that credibility, which is allegations of sexual misconduct by officers? There was recently a case in Palo Alto, and we've got some questions that were also gathered on the street but are not on videotape form, and the very first one was, how do you handle that difficult issue when it arises in the department?
Well, as difficult as the issue is, the response is fairly simple. When an allegation of sexual misconduct or any other kind of criminal misconduct on the part of an officer is received, it triggers 2 processes. The first process is a criminal investigation, and the second process is an internal affairs investigation. And they parallel one another, but they're separate. The criminal investigation has as its goal successful criminal prosecution, which, as you know, we achieved in our recent case. And the second process, the administrative investigation, has to do with the alleged offender's status as an employee with the city. And it would be typically an internal affairs investigation, which, if serious criminal misconduct were proved to be true, would probably result in a termination.
But what about the issue of repairing any breach that might be, any breach in the public trust that may have been caused by the incident? Is there any specific response that your department undertakes?
Well, I would say I would answer that question on 2 levels. Number one, we had a tremendous outpouring of positive support from the public. I got a number of letters and phone calls and emails complimenting the department on the way that we reacted to the recent incident in Palo Alto, and also expressing confidence and statements like, you know, we know that this one particular officer does not represent the Palo Alto Police Department, and our contacts with Palo Alto Police Department have been, you know, really great, so thank you for the good job you're doing. And during a period which was very painful for our department, those kinds of messages were really positive reinforcement for the people that are out there doing a good job. So I think that, sure, to some extent, the reputation of the department and the credibility of the department is affected, but I think at least in Palo Alto, the community was was sophisticated enough to realize that an aberration is not representative of the whole department, and that 99 and 9/10 of the police officers that are out there in my community and in other communities are going to be honest, hardworking people who are trying to deliver good service. The other thing that I would say, though, is that in a broader sense, all of us share in the responsibility to try to recruit and train and retain and supervise really high-quality people. And the way that you eliminate problems like we recently experienced is by those front-end processes. When you go through the examination process and the psychological exams and the background examinations and all the processes that people that go through to get hired by one of our police departments have to be extremely exhaustive, and we have to really put a lot of emphasis on those programs at the front end, and then give people the best training around and really strong role models and strong supervision from their first-line supervisors. I think those are the keys.
But on occasion, somebody does slip through, and you do have a problem that you have to deal with, and you deal with it swiftly and decisively. You're fair. You have to have an investigation. And what's different about an administrative investigation in internal affairs than from a criminal, it's all protected through confidentiality under the government code. And that's very difficult for the public to understand sometimes when you've got a disciplinary action going on and you can't talk about it. Yet sometimes the employee can, and they can give their spin, and you're forbidden by law to say a thing. And sometimes that's portrayed as trying to withhold information when it couldn't be farther from the truth. We sometimes would like to talk about these things, but we absolutely can't.
Well, Chief Bowling, I don't know whether you can talk or not, but I understand your department has faced a similar situation recently where it's been a community controversy over the retention or release of one of your officers. Where does that issue stand today?
Well, I'm not able to talk, as you indicate. 832.7 of the Penal Code protects the officer's rights in terms of the confidentiality of his police business. And then, of course, as Steve mentioned, 3100 of the government code also protects people's right on the investigation. It's the Police Officer's Bill of Rights. And I'd have to agree with Steve. There are certain issues that you really wish you'd come right out and let people know why the nature of the charges, what the allegations were, what evidence you may have found in terms of that investigation. But we are prohibited from giving out that kind of information. So consequently, you wind up hearing, as Steve indicated, the individual side, but you don't hear what we as the administration who are faced with the issue, you don't hear what our real reasons are. And so it presents a real challenge in terms of trying to deal with those issues with the community and let them know that, we're doing this in the best interest of the city, best interest of the police department. However, we just cannot divulge the details to you.
Chief Dwyer said that one of the most effective ways to create and maintain a department that's professional and effective is through effective recruitment and retention. Yet here we all are living in one of the most expensive housing markets at this point in the world. How are you addressing that with your departments? How do you get quality people to serve when it's so difficult to live here? And then when they're serving, how do you keep them here given the price not only of housing but generally of the cost of living?
Well, certainly there are no easy answers right now to that. I think as chiefs now our recruitment efforts are much different than they were in the past. In the past it might have been just a flyer or a newspaper ad, and it's now we recruit like any other company in the valley to try to get quality people to do the very unique job that we do. As it relates to how do we retain people, it's involving trying to create a work environment that people really enjoy. And there's certainly a need to, for us, we try to look at alternative work schedules, flex time, different things that with the reality that people are going over the bridge on long commutes, etc., that makes it feasible for them to work in an area of such high cost of living and maybe live somewhere else.
Now, I know you recently came by choice from Redwood City to Menlo Park.
Right.
Do you go out and try and poach from each other for lateral hires? Is that part of the program for keeping fully staffed?
Well, let me speak to the subject. Being the lowest paid agency in San Mateo County, certainly our agency has faced many challenges in that respect of retention of personnel. And one of the things that I'm constantly working on with the POA, the Police Officers Association, is the issues of what is it that they need and what is it that we can provide in order to make life more comfortable for the officers, to make their lives easier, and to try and retain our personnel. It's certainly not easy when you have agencies next door and up the road who are paying considerably higher than we are. But certainly one of the things that we market to our folks is the fact that, yeah, we are a training ground. We are a training ground for other agencies. But that speaks highly in and of itself in that you come to East Palo Alto, you'll get probably twice the activity and twice the experience of any officer in the Central Valley here. And so you want to move up. It's a good place to start. In other words, to gain that experience, to be able to reach out or to promote even.
Chief Cader, where do your officers live? Probably not in Atherton.
No, they sure don't. We have over a third of our officers live across the bridge, one bridge or another. Everyone lives out of town. The average officer lives 18 miles from the station. So we're grappling with the problem if we have another big disaster, an earthquake, how we're going to recall people to work, how are they going to get across the bridge, and it's a real problem. Something that Wes said was about recruiting and training and paying a competitive wage. It's difficult to educate the public and the city council about when we're negotiating for wages and what it costs to recruit an officer today and to train them. If we send them through the academy, we have to start recruiting. It costs thousands of dollars just to process them. They go away for 22 weeks, is it 24 now?
It's going up to 24.
24 weeks in an academy that they get paid through. Then they come back and they go in a field training program, so they're with another officer for another 15, 18 to 20 weeks. And we're paying them salary all of this time. So it can run from $40,000 to $60,000 to recruit, train, and get an officer out in the street and is viable to work by himself. So if we lose a couple of those, you can see how money can add up very quickly.
Because you lose your investment.
Absolutely, and then you've got to start all over again. So.
Yeah, I recently went back and looked at the figures, even from my department, and to recruit someone, put them through the academy, after you do all the background, the testing, put them through the academy, and then through 16 weeks of field training, we have a $46,000 investment in that individual.
It's an enormous investment.
Yes, it is.
Which I'm sure you hate to lose.
Absolutely.
Chief Dwyer, what about in Palo Alto? Where do your officers live?
It's a very sore subject with me this week because I am losing 3 officers this week to San Jose. And for the first time in 7 years until this week, we were up to full staffing in terms of numbers. So I'm out beating the bushes again. I made a job offer, a conditional job offer last week to an officer from another agency. He will commute from Manteca to Palo Alto. Hopefully, because he is originally from the Palo Alto area, he hopes to relocate and to come back into this area, probably not in Palo Alto, but in the Palo Alto area. It's a serious issue. I have officers who are commuting daily from Tracy, from Hollister, from Morgan Hill, a lot from San Jose, some from up in the San Mateo County area, and a lot from across the bridge. And I would say the average distance is probably 30 miles for me.
Which must increase the stress on your officers. They're away from their families longer than they need to be. They're in traffic. Does that affect their job performance? Well,
I'm sure it does, but I think that's probably something they share with just about everybody in Silicon Valley who's commuting in. And I think that certainly some aspects of our recruitment and retention problem are a little different from the private sector and the high-tech industries that are here. But we also share some of those same problems. It's, we're trying to recruit and retain people in an area that has very low unemployment. It's tough for public agencies, whether it's police or other public agencies, to compete salary-wise and benefit-wise with some of the private industries that are out there. So it makes it very difficult for us.
Well, I want to come back with one more follow-up question on this difficult subject of recruitment and retention, but first we need to take a break and remind our viewers this is Border Crossings here on Impact.
Where's dinner?
Well, I thought you'd be home a couple of hours ago, and I put everything away. So
what is this? Pizza?
You had just called me. I would have known what.
Dinner ready is pizza.
Honey, please don't be so loud. Please don't. Let go of me!
Get in the kitchen!
No! That hurts.
Do you want to see what hurts? That's what hurts! That's what hurts!
Oh, please! I can't. Please.
For information, call 1-800-END-ABUSE.
We're back here on Border Crossings, talking with the four chiefs of the regional police departments. We have Scott Vermeer from Menlo Park, Wes Bowling from East Palo Alto, Chief Steve Cader in Atherton, and Pat Dwyer in Palo Alto. We were discussing the challenges that all of you face in recruitment and retention given the high cost of living in this area. I know that Mayor Fazzino in Palo Alto has talked about perhaps earmarking certain affordable housing units, especially new construction, for delivery to either officers or if they don't qualify in their salary to some of your staff. Would that help?
I think that's an interesting initiative. It's a very creative idea. They've actually done it in Mountain View. Chief Mike Mailer and his city council and the community there got together, and they have a partnership in place where police, firefighters, and I think teachers are getting below market rate housing. And I think it's something that certainly the city of Palo Alto could look at. I'm not sure exactly if it would work as well here as in some areas that are trying it, because there isn't a lot of new housing being built in Palo Alto. Palo Alto is a city that's pretty much built out, and there's not a lot of new residential construction going on here. I think that one of the things that Scott said earlier, though, may be the most important thing that we as chiefs need to keep in mind, though, and that's establishing a positive environment for people to work in. If people enjoy coming to work, if you can make it fun and satisfying for police officers to come to work, and you give them a department that they're proud of and good leadership, I think that our retention problems are going to be at least a lot smaller than some agencies that are comparable to us. And I think all four of these agencies have made strides in those areas over the past couple of years, especially Wes.
Anybody got an anecdote? Fun and interesting to come to work. I'm sure police work can at times be very stressful. How do you make it fun and interesting? Extra boxes of donuts.
Oh.
Any of your departments use any specific retention techniques you want to share?
Participatory management, good equipment, just a general environment, just an organizational culture that fosters innovation and participation by the officers, and so they have a good feeling of where they work.
Yeah. Positive leadership at the first line, at the sergeant's level and the lieutenant's level, I think are the keys. If you've got the right leadership in place, we'll keep our people.
Right. We have a fun job, and our people come to this job because it is fun. We don't have the perks of private sector. We don't have any stock options to give, and we really, obviously our government agency, we'd be criticized for almost anything we give out to our employees. So it's all about that environment, the positive leadership, and that's all we have to sell, and so that's where our efforts really have to be.
I'd like to return to the, indirectly I guess, to the issue of community policing, and specifically to how the community experiences the interactions with your department. For many of us, when we see a cop in the neighborhood, we think, great, that's just terrific, that makes the place safer. For others, where there's a pattern or a history of interaction that has been unsuccessful, there's a different immediate feeling or interaction, and specifically there's been articles in the paper recently about the issue of suspect profiling, the so-called DWB, driving while black, driving while brown. How do your departments address this sensitive subject when you're making decisions about stops of a potential suspect?
I would say three things. Clear policy guidelines. You have to have a clear statement of policy that says that any stops or detentions are going to be based only on probable cause, only on suspicious activity. And the department has to show a commitment to that kind of a professional policy right from the top and all the way down. Training would be the second thing, and then discipline if there are violations that send a clear message to the whole organization that it's not going to be tolerated.
I have to agree with Pat. I mean, all your stops have to be predicated on probable cause. And quite frankly, my vision at night anymore, I couldn't see who's driving a car anyway, so I don't know how we can. But.
Well, then how does this perception arise out in the community? This notion that a disproportionate number of people of color are stopped in traffic stops. There must be some underlying cause of that issue bubbling up. What do you suppose it is?
Well, I would think it would be that there may be cases, hopefully not in our communities, where things occur, they're publicized, and people take from that a perception. But in my experience as being a police officer in this area, that is not the case, and that we have hardworking men and women who really do follow those guidelines, and when something inappropriate happens, the departments make sure that it would never happen again.
I'd have to concur. Of course, in my case, if we were accused of DWV, then it would certainly be true because we're predominantly a black and brown community. However, one of the many things that is stressed in police work today, and is taught by many of the police professionals, is the issues of ethics and doing things in the right way. And I think certainly the training and the professionalism that we impart to our troops will have a lot to do with how that occurs. It's been my perception or my understanding and belief that again there's been some overemphasis and overly beliefs of the issues that have been shown on television where persons of color have been stopped, and some of those I believe have been blown out of perspective, and so consequently folks will look at it and they will tend to think that that's perhaps what is happening. I would like to think that with the professionalism that we're all striving for and pushing for now in our agencies, that you're certainly not going to see it here in this valley.
You know, another group that may experience the police, say, differently than I do are the working poor and the homeless in our communities who may have interactions that, again, with the police departments that they don't always think are successful or fair. And at the same time, there's an allegation that our communities are making decisions that, in effect, criminalize conduct, whether it's panhandling on a median or sitting on the street. How, in your enforcement protocols, do you deal with the interactions with the homeless community, whose members very often don't have a lot of choices about where they can be? Chief Dwyer, do you want to? I know it's been especially urgent in Palo Alto.
Why did I think that one was going to be?
Sit, lie.
I think that there's a variety of perceptions, and really, quite frankly, this is a very volatile issue in the city of Palo Alto. I think what's important from a police enforcement standpoint is that we enforce the law with respect for everybody's dignity, regardless of who they are, what their economic status is, and that everybody be treated with, basically courtesy and respect, number one. So that said, that I think everybody deserves to be treated with courtesy and respect. I think that there's a perception out there sometimes that officers are coming down hard on homeless people, but officers can only enforce laws that are on the books. And the fact that somebody is homeless, or the fact that somebody is a member of the working poor, for example, is something that is going to require a multi-agency and a multidisciplinary response to cure. I mean, the police department cannot cure homelessness, nor can it cure the economic woes of a community. What it can do, however, is enforce laws in a fair and compassionate manner. It's important to note on the other side of the coin that the fact that somebody is homeless or the fact that somebody is a member of the working poor does not exempt them from laws. I mean, the same laws that apply to everybody else apply to people who are homeless. So that if we would, for example, enforce trespassing laws in certain private property or posted property, say public posted property along a creek bed or something like that, well, there's no intrinsic right to camp there. And there are health reasons and safety reasons why people shouldn't be setting up camps there. So when the police department comes in, usually because we're called by somebody to come in and enforce these laws, we get characterized as the villains because we're forcing these people to move to another location. When in fact there are health issues and safety issues that really prompt a police response. I mean, most police officers, as a matter of fact, I could say without a doubt, virtually every police officer I know would rather be doing something else than dealing with the homeless issue.
Why?
Because it is a volatile issue, and because a police officer feels very helpless to deal with a situation where he knows he can't really affect the kind of solution that we like to affect. When we go to a problem, when we go to a robbery or we go to a traffic accident, we conduct an investigation, and usually we can bring whatever process that is, whether it's a criminal investigation or a traffic investigation, to some kind of a conclusion and some kind of a termination and reach a disposition that's reasonable. And when you're dealing with issues like unhoused people in my city, the police officer can respond and try to get people channeled into some kind of a program or a resource that's existing in the county, but we can't solve the problem. And that's really hard for police officers because I think police officers like to solve problems. They want to see some resolution, and it's hard to deal with situations where there is no immediate resolution, where a long-term multidisciplinary response is going to be necessary. And I think, that's another level at which the police departments and in fact, I think most government departments, local government departments have to cooperate and work together. I know the city of Palo Alto is working closely right now with people involved in a number of initiatives, including the community working group and some of the other agencies and some of the church groups, faith groups that are existing out there in the community to try to achieve longer-term resolutions than we can, responding on a call-by-call basis to there's a homeless guy sleeping on my front porch, or the water district calls as we have a homeless camp that's set up, right next to one of our bridges, and we need you people to move people out. That's frustrating for police officers because we don't really get the kind of resolution we're looking for.
Chief Vermeer, you're not a social service agency, you're a public safety agency, and yet I'm sure you must experience that same desire to try and affect more long-term solutions when you've got a repeat offender who happens to be homeless. Any special approach that your department takes to that constituency?
Well, I think Chief Dwyer said it best when he says it really has to be a multi-agency approach. The successes that I've really seen as in officers who've enlisted mental health, the Veterans Administration, the District Attorney's Office, a number of agencies coming together to try to form solutions for individuals. The problem is we have so many individuals in these situations, it can look like we're not making a dent. I think officers on a daily basis are really creating some solutions for some individuals who are amenable to working with them and working with other agencies. But the multidisciplinary approach is the way it really has to work, because we as a group have only the law enforcement tools.
I'd have to agree with that. Just a little personal side note, and I only bring this up to drive home the point. I pulled into the gas station to gas my car one night, and there was an individual there who was panhandling from the customers at the gas station, and the gas station attendant told me that he had chased the guy off several times. So I talked to the individual, and I told him that, look, you need to get out of this situation. I don't want to have to come and arrest you. I don't want to have my folks come and arrest you and put you in jail. But let's find something else for you to do. And I said, tell you what, you come to my office tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I said, and we're going to take care of your problem. And he did. He showed up. And I took him over to New Sweet Home, which is a church in East Palo Alto. And they also have a halfway house where they help individuals who get clean and sober, get off the drugs, find some meaning for their life. They put him in turn in a program called Free at Last in East Palo Alto, and between the two of them, he is now returned to his family and is living in the city of San Jose with his family, as opposed to living next to Drew Health Center in a makeshift encampment.
Well, there's a success story. Thank you for sharing that. While the issues of the homeless are obviously of great concern to those in that community, it's oftentimes the violent crime, personal crime, that grabs the headlines. We have a perception that this region is a fairly safe place to live, and yet occasionally there's hammer attacks in Ball Park or other instances of crimes against persons in each community. What is your overall assessment of the safety of this region? And at the same time, what sort of tips can you give viewers on how to protect their own persons?
I would say generally that this is a very safe place to live, work and go to school. I think our rate of violent crime is far lower than some of the other major metropolitan areas. I think the best advice that we give our residents is if you see something that doesn't look right to you, give us a call. You know, we want to know of anything that's just not right in your neighborhood, as strangers or something. It's not an on-scene violent attack, obviously. So we try to prevent problems before they start.
We've got just a little bit of time. Chief Dwyer, do you want to add to that?
I would just say that I think that we live in probably the safest area in California, but that should not lead people into a false sense of complacency. Even in the safest cities in California, occasionally violent crime can and will occur, so that people should just use common sense and try to avoid putting themselves in situations that could make them that one aberration situation that occurs. And you know, with regard to crime reduction, I think what Wes has accomplished in East Palo Alto over the last couple of years is phenomenal. We have had safe communities for a long time, but the transition that's occurred in East Palo Alto over the past couple of years is something that he might want to expand on.
We have just a couple of seconds left. Chief
Well,
Bowling?
I'd like to say here again, it's not a single agency that deserves the credit. Certainly Palo Alto and Menlo Park's part in helping me to achieve that goal has been, you know, of immeasurable help. I couldn't have done it without them. And I think that, you know, our 70% reduction in violent crimes speaks for itself. And again, community policing is community and police, not just police. And certainly having the community do its part and join us is very important.
Well, I want to thank all four of you for taking the time to be here today. Scott Vermeer from Menlo Park, Wes Bowling, East Palo Alto, Steve Cader from Atherton, and Pat Dwyer from Palo Alto. We know that all the residents of our communities appreciate the jobs that you and your departments do, and we greatly appreciate you taking the time to visit with us here today. I'm Owen Byrd. You've been listening to Border Crossings. This show will originally air on Sunday, August 15th on Channel 77, and will repeat Wednesday, August 18th on Channel 6 at 10 p.m., and again Wednesday, August 25th on Channel 6 at 10 p.m. So for everyone involved with producing Border Crossings, thank you for being with us and taking an interest in our region. Good day.